I'd now like to welcome our keynote presenter, world-known disability comedian Nina G, to the stage. Nina G is the San Francisco Bay Area's favorite female stuttering stand-up comedian. Granted, she's the only one. She's also a disability advocate, activist, storyteller, children's book author, and educator. She brings her humor to help people confront and understand social justice issues such as disability, diversity, and equity. When she isn't performing at comedy clubs like the San Francisco Punchline or Laugh Factory, she's presenting as a keynote speaker and presenter and training professionals. Nina's part of the comedy troupe, the Comedians with Disabilities Act, which brings laughter and awareness to audiences of all ages across the country. She's the author of a children's book titled Once Upon an Accommodation, a book about learning disabilities. It helps children and adults advocate for their rights as a person with a disability. Nina's one-person show, Going Beyond Inspirational, which is a comical exploration about growing up with learning and speech disabilities, debuted in 2015 and was featured in CBS and San Francisco Local. Please join me in welcoming Nina G to the stage.
Thank you, everyone. That was so nice. Thank you so much. So I am not YLF alumni because I graduated high school in 1991. And YLF started in 1992, 93, 92. So I was not lucky enough to be among you, but I have spoken at YLFs in California, in Montana, in Kansas. I spoke at a thing in Florida where they stole the YLF ideas and did something there. So I feel like I'm part of your family and you invite me in, and I really appreciate that because this is one of my favorite organizations. So I'm so happy to be here, so thank you. I am part of a comedy troupe called the Comedians with Disabilities Act. So it's me, a guy who uses a wheelchair, another guy who's blind, and another guy who's a little person. And people come up to me all the time and they say, you know, Nina, stuttering and dyslexia, those aren't real disabilities. And you shouldn't be in that comedy troupe. And I tell them, if you look at the definition of what a disability is, according to the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's a physical or mental impairment that substantially results in having to deal with jerks. So, thank you. Some of you have seen me in a nightclub. You know that joke goes another way. And I cleaned it up for today. So, there you go. And if I could have my PowerPoint up. Thank you for the laugh back there. That was good. And so when you stutter, you get a lot of very weird interactions. A lot of times I will say my name and it comes out as Nina. And people do stuff like this in the midst of my stutter. They will kind of like, spit it out kind of thing with their hand, because this is helpful, everybody. This is good. This isn't telling me to spit it out. That's all good. Or when I say my name, they'll say, hey, Nina. Something I've gotten since the third grade my entire life is not funny unless it's said to the Chia Pet song. Yes, Nina. Like, that's kind of good, kind of funny. I will take that. And I don't know what it is about stuttering or every single disability on the face of the earth, but as soon as someone meets you, they suddenly have a PhD in the thing you have. Because I get advice all the time, like, just slow down and breathe. Because in the 30-plus years I've been stuttering, I've never thought of that. And I guess I have been breathing this entire time, so, and I call that stutter splaining when they tell me how to stutter. Um, so let me see. I wanted to, okay. Okay, so I always like to tell people a little bit about stuttering because we're only 1% of the population, so people don't always have the best information. And stuttering, a lot of times people think that it's nervousness. I can be really nervous and not stutter whatsoever. Or sometimes they think it has to do with intelligence. And I was in this environment once. It was this classroom where I could kind of tell they had these weird attitudes about stuttering, so I explained it to them. And I said that stuttering is caused by a difference in the brain. And I say a difference in the brain. I don't say an abnormality of the brain because there is brain diversity. And so that's why I say there is a difference in the brain. That's not always what you hear in your psychology classes. So I just want to make that clear. Thank you. Yes. Abnormality. The difference. And so there is a difference in my brain, and it's right here on the left side, right next to the Broca's area part of the brain. So that is the expressive part of the brain, and it's where you produce speech. And there is a difference there, perhaps a sensitivity, and that is why when if someone who stutters sings or they put on a funny voice, then they don't stutter anymore. And that is, in fact, why Marilyn Monroe, who is on my PowerPoint here, that is why she talked the way she did. And I explained that to this class, and I added, that's why Marilyn talked like this. Because if you talk like this, you can trick your brain into not stuttering anymore. To which one of the men in the group says, that's very sexy. Perhaps you should talk like that all the time. I was like, no, that's okay. I think that I'd rather stutter. And that is the thing, is that we don't need to be fixed. A lot of people tell us that we need to be fixed, and we don't. What we need is the environment to be accessible, and we need minds and hearts and laws and policies that are accessible too. And let's start planning all of our applause breaks for the interpreter change. That was lovely. So I wanted to share a little bit about my own experiences. And I am about 2.5 years old here. And this was about the time that I was first identified as perhaps having a disability, because at this time I was what's called a late talker. And as a late talker, when I wanted chicken, I would make this sound. And for cheese, I would do. And my parents were like, maybe that's not normal. I don't know. And so they got me into speech therapy. And what that meant, what this was an early sign of an auditory processing disability. So I like to explain that as Charlie Brown's teacher. Okay, good. Some of you get that. These kids today, they don't know what that means. What does Charlie Brown's teacher sound like, everybody? Wah. Yes. When you have auditory processing, that is sometimes what it sounds like. And so when I was, I did it, huh? They told me not to push a button, and I pushed it. And now, okay, there we go. Okay, but that's not on the PowerPoint. It has to be, there you go. Give it up for Brandon, everybody. That's the man behind the computer. And so when you have an auditory processing disability, you hear want, 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 want. So what I was doing when I was doing was I was saying what I heard. And that became dyslexia when I first just started to read. Now, this was my first day of school. Okay, so this is my first day of school in the blue. This is my first day, first grade. I had one of those moms who was a caregiver who was like, we're going to take a picture of you every single day on the first day of school. Up until graduate school, she did this. and so this is me in the first grade. I was so excited. I was so happy. And then by the 8th grade, it was this. Not so happy here. Yes, yes. And I went to Catholic school in the 1980s. There's lots of wonderful, great Catholic schools now that are very accessible. But what I tell people is never pity me for having a disability, but you can pity me for being in Catholic school in the 1980s with a disability. That, yes, yes. Yes, and part of this was I was diagnosed in the 3rd grade with dyslexia, and that's about the same time that I also started to stutter. And what happened was my parents learned about this, and my parents, they were really great advocates, and they would go to the school every single year, and they would say she needs to take tests where you ask her the questions or you don't count spelling, because it's because I knew the answers, but perhaps I couldn't spell things, or I, instead of having 3 hours of homework like I did, perhaps they could shorten it down to an hour and a half. So these were the kinds of accommodations that they asked for. But every single year from 3rd grade to 8th grade, they were met with the same thing. And they were met with the teachers saying, having those accommodations really wouldn't be fair to the rest of the kids. And that if Nina needs to have those things, maybe she doesn't belong in this school, and maybe she just isn't that smart. Now, keep in mind, I have my doctorate now. So they could have been wrong, I think. But hearing this year after year, it ate away at my self-esteem, and it ate away at who I thought I was and what I was capable of. And in fact, it had affected me so much that I wish that I wasn't alive anymore. And I was 9 years old. I was 10 years old with these kinds of thoughts. And I share these very personal things with you so that you have a context to know what I did to my 8th grade teacher. Because it's coming. I'm just warning you now. I'm going to butter you up for this. So in the 8th grade, my teacher, she made the accommodation that I could do every other problem. So all the math stuff, all of the English diagramming sentences. You kids today, you don't have to do diagramming sentences. But in Catholic school, we had to do that. And so instead of doing the 30 of those, I would do every other one. So easy ones, middle ones, hard ones. It was a basic accommodation that you got in the 8th grade. And halfway during the term, I asked my teacher what my grade was. And she said, well, you have been doing half the work, so you are getting an F. And I was like, well, I could have not done anything and gotten the same grade. And I challenged her on that. And she's all, no, you are getting an F because you've only been doing half the work. It's like, that's not what an accommodation is. Now, I started to act out a little bit in the 8th grade. And also, if you call a stuttering dyslexic to read out loud, they're going to be in the bathroom. Okay, so I spent most of my 8th grade in the bathroom. And there was this one time when my cousin Lisa came into the bathroom while everybody else was in class. And she had the teacher's coffee cup. And she was getting, no, don't say it yet. And she was getting water for the teacher. And that's when it occurred to me. I said, Lisa, why don't you put just a little bit of toilet water in that coffee cup? Just a teeny tiny bit. And we went over and we dunked it in. Just a teeny bit. It wasn't a lot. And she filled the rest up with water, with tap water. And I went back to the classroom, and I got to see my 8th grade teacher drink toilet water. And I have to say, I was so empowered, everybody. So empowered. Now, I know a lot of you work with youth, and I share this story with you for one very important reason, and that is watch your coffee cups, okay? It's really ironic that that's what they gave the sponsors. So watch those coffee cups, everybody. But I also share that story with you because I had a voice that was not being heard. I was trying to advocate. My parents were trying to advocate, and it wasn't working. And kids don't necessarily have those skills internally. They have to be taught. And luckily, my parents came from disabled families. So my dad, on my dad's side, I am 4th generation disabled. So as long as my family has been in the United States, we have also been disabled in the United States. And so that is how I knew how to advocate. And my mom's mom had polio, so my mom knew about advocacy too, and she knew that disability was a normal part of life. And from them, I learned this. Not everybody has those experiences. And YLF is exactly what kids, youth, young adults need, because they need to be taught those things. And I have met YLF alum throughout the country who are stand-up comics who I have performed with, who are advocates, who are doing the things that they want to do. And if we can give them that voice, and if we can facilitate that, we're not going to be drinking the toilet water that my 8th grade teacher drank. So, and I wanted to share, I'm going to hop through here a little bit. So, yeah, I don't think it's working. So go one more. Brandon, okay. Do it again. Okay, I'm going to skip that. Let's go right to the iceberg, okay? So there is a theory in stuttering, which is that stuttering is like an iceberg, okay? So on an iceberg, you see the tip, but then at the bottom, there are all those there is most of the iceberg. So the iceberg's big, but what you see is a tiny piece of that. But then underneath that, there is the more substantial part. And this theorist thought that stuttering was just the tip of the iceberg. What you hear are my repetitions and my blocks. What you see is my face when I stutter. But underneath all of that are the feelings that you have because of your stuttering. And stuttering is a lot like other disabilities. And when I explain the iceberg to my dad, who is hard of hearing, he says that those feelings are things that he's had. And those feelings include shame, denial, isolation. Oh, I have to go really close because I didn't write these down. So shame, denial, isolation, guilt, anxiety, fear, and hopelessness. And the person who came up with this theory said that that is the real issue when you stutter, is these things. And what they advocated was that as you took care of these things, then it was just your stuttering that you dealt with. But the thing is, icebergs are a lot like clouds in the sky. That if you look at clouds in the sky, if you see them, they start to transform. Whereas from one perspective, a cloud can look like a dragon, but from another, it could look like a bunny rabbit. And if you could click it again. And icebergs are a lot like that, because if you look at disability, if you look at your disability iceberg, you will see that the denial turns to acceptance, that the shame turns into pride, into disability pride, and anxiety turns to kindness, guilt turns to comfort, fear turns into courage, isolation turns into community, and hopelessness turns into hope. Each of us has the ability to look at disability in a different way. But even better, we have the ability to help other people change how they think about disability, to think of it more than just a meme on Facebook, to think of it more than just what they see on TV. By YLF being out there, they are retraining and reteaching how people think about disability. And I wanted to end with my favorite book. So if you could click it again. And I'm just going to do this, Brandon. Can you see me with my arm if I do this? Okay. So The Carrot Seed is my favorite book. And one of the things that really helped me when I was a youth was I started to work at a daycare when I was 14 years old. And my story times kicked butt. Like, I could entertain 2-year-olds for a half hour, which is amazing. And one of my favorite books to read was The Carrot Seed. And so I wanted to read a bit from that book today. So here it goes. And I'm going to pretend like you're all 5-year-olds or 3-year-olds, okay? All right, so here we go. A little boy planted a carrot seed. His mother said it won't come up. His father said it won't come up. His big brother said it won't come up. Everyone kept saying it won't come up. But the little boy still watered the seed every day and picked the weeds until one day. Oh, then everyone kept saying it won't come up. Okay, then one day a carrot came up. Look at that. The ground's moving, and a carrot came up, and and there it is. It's a great big carrot. And I love this story because it reminds me so much of the disability experience, where we are told so many times that we can't do it, we can't do it, we can't do it. But we have to know that if it's something that we want, that we need to work, and we need to have people on our team who are going to help to advocate, and that we have a voice in what we want and what we want others to know. YLF, thank you so much for having me. I love you guys. Thank you. And I have copies of my book here if anybody wants them. It's usually $12, but today I'll sell them for 10. So thank you, everybody, so much.
Would you like a coffee cup?
It's sealed.
It's sealed. Okay, thank you.